This film is based on my personal story. I'd had an illegal abortion. Blindfolded, without anesthetic, I never saw the face of the person who did the abortion. My own doctor, who'd refused to provide a safe abortion, would now try to save my life. This film follows the stories of what I and many other women lived through, and then documents the challenge to providing that service safely today. When abortion was illegal, thousands of women died.
When we got them, we received them like with a temperature of 105. Bleeding. Totally infected. We had some die in shock because they did not tell the truth as to what had happened. And they felt like we were only getting the information to report them to the police. They was just plain housewives who felt like, I can't afford another child.
I knew that I could lose my medical license. I knew that I could go to prison. And just as I had to trust these women who came to me not to bring charges against me, which could put me in prison, they had to trust me to give them good medical care and service and not harm them. And that was a scary thing in those days. It was frightening for women to come from great distances to a little town in East Texas to some unknown doctor. They came by bus, by train, by car, and they had to trust that they were going to leave there intact and alive.
Before documenting the era of illegal abortion, it's important to get an overview of what's happened since abortion first became legal. After a century of tragedies, a nationwide move to legalize the procedure of abortion led to a 1973 Supreme Court decision giving women the right to choose. The struggle to protect that right is ongoing.
I can remember the last time we had a march and walking down the street and thinking, I thought that we wouldn't have to do this anymore. When the Supreme Court decision was won, we all went, that's it, we won. And we relaxed. But at the same time, you had these groups that were organizing to repeal it. And what they did was chip away, because then Medicaid funding wasn't allowed for poor women. And then there was spousal consent that came up. And then you couldn't provide services to minors without parental notification or parental consent. But it means that you can never relax.
We're hearing about knitting needles again. We're hearing about bleach douches again. And they may not be reporting it to their physician or to the judge that they end up talking to or to the clinic worker at the hospital, but there are girls out there doing that.
Even though history may be repeating itself now, this story begins when abortion was illegal. Until the mid-1800s, abortions were legal and available in the United States. Both the state and the church permitted abortions if they occurred before quickening, when the mother first perceived fetal movement. In 1847, the newly formed American Medical Association began a campaign to professionalize medicine, outlawing what it called quackery. Included in the ban were midwives and herbalists. Protestant and Catholic churches joined the medical establishment in expressing their condemnation. Legislation restricting abortion continued to spread, and by the turn of the century, both birth control and abortion were illegal in most states. if a woman needed medical attention after a botched abortion, she faced a dangerous situation. Even though infected and bleeding, she was often required to testify against the person who performed the abortion before she could receive medical care. From the late 1800s through 1973, at least 500,000 clandestine illegal abortions were taking place each year. Some women found safe operations, but most faced the back alleys.
I was 17 years old. I was married. And 10 months after I was married, I had a baby girl. She was very ill, and the doctor told me that if I ever had another child, I would die. 3 months later, I was pregnant again. And I was absolutely terrified. I couldn't have that baby, because if I did, and I died, who would take care of the little baby I had? And so I asked the young women where I worked if there was somebody who could help me do something. And they sent me to a woman, and she lived in a shack. And she put, I think it was a strip of slippery elm bark, and she inserted this up my uterus. And she said, now you go home, and that will swell up, and you will have pain, and you will probably have some temperature, but you will have a miscarriage. 2 days later, I was in such pain. And so I went back out to see this woman. And she said, I told you not to come back. And I said, I have nowhere else to go. And she just held me up to her chest for a minute. And she said, honey, did you think it was so easy to be a woman?
Illegal abortions were expensive and dangerous. Some women attempted to abort themselves. Lola Huth was the lead dancer of the José Limón Dance Company. She was married and the mother of a baby girl when she died from a self-induced abortion. Even though she was using an IUD for birth control, Lola became pregnant. A doctor told her that the IUD would probably cause the baby to be deformed, but that removing it might cause a miscarriage. Lola weighed the risks and decided to have the IUD removed.
She went back for the scheduled appointment, and he said, I'm sorry, I have consulted with colleagues, and I cannot do anything that could implicate me in an illegal act. Right now, the whole abortion issue is very, very hot, and I just can't implicate myself. And she said, well, then I'm inclined to believe I will do it myself. She punctured a vein and got air into her bloodstream.